Next, it is my pleasure to introduce the president of CCAS, Dr. Vickie Rutledge Shields. Vickie Shields is in her 7th year as dean at Eastern Washington University, and she is in her 2nd year as dean of the newly formed College of Social and Behavioral Sciences and Social Work. She has served as dean of the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences at EWU since August of 2005. Prior to moving to Washington State and joining EWU, Dr. Shields worked for 12 years at Bowling Green State University in Bowling Green, Ohio, where she held the positions of Assistant Associate Professor of Telecommunications, Women's Studies, Director of Women's Studies Program, and Associate Dean of Arts and Sciences for Faculty, Curriculum, and General Education, where she led a successful general education reform. Vickie Shields received her MA and PhD degrees in communication from The Ohio State University. And her BA, we learned to say that at Cincinnati. We were only University of Cincinnati. And her BA in communication from Boise State University, where she was named BSU Alumna of the Year in 2005. In that same year, she completed a management development program at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. An internationally recognized communications and feminist media scholar, Dr. Shields writes from a cultural perspective on gender media content and media audiences, specifically in the areas of advertising, television, and film. She is also an expert in theoretical and methodological approaches to visual literacy. She is the author of Measuring Up, How Advertising Affects Self-Image, published by the University of Pennsylvania Press, as well as over 50 articles, chapters, and presentations in media and cultural studies. Measuring Up was the winner of the 2004 Award for Outstanding Research in Visual Communication by the Visual Communication Division of the National Communication Association. Vickie lives with her husband Peter and 2 daughters Claire and Ava in Spokane, Washington, where they try to take advantage of all the Pacific Northwest has to offer, including hiking, boating, off-roading in their Jeep Wrangler, wine tasting, and IPA microbrews, and whitewater rafting. Very little time left over for deaning, apparently. A lifetime equestrian, Vickie and her family still enjoy horses and keeping up with professional rodeo. Vickie is an art enthusiast with a particular passion for the European Impressionist and Post-Impressionist paintings of the late 19th and early 20th century. She and Peter collect art when they travel. And on top of all of this, she really does have the best hair of anybody in CCAS. So without further ado, please welcome Vickie Shields.
Listen to me!
Listen to you? By what right?
By divine right, if you must. I'm your king.
No, you're not. You told me so yourself. You said you didn't want it. Why should I waste my time listening to
Because
you?
I have a right to be, and I have a voice!
This is a battle, a war, and the casualties could be your hearts and souls.
Armies of academics going forward, measuring poetry.
No, we'll not have that here. Now, my class, you will learn to think for yourselves again. You will learn to savor words and language.
No matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world.
It was just wrong what happened, not only to us, but other people that were, you know, shut up or made to feel threatened for feeling a certain way, you know, about the war or whatever. And
everything was so bizarre, it was almost humorous. I just could not believe people cared what I said.
But it had to be somebody or some group that seemed like the all-American girls. It's perfect. It had to be the unlikely voice.
Excuse me, I'm looking for Mr. Wilkerson.
You found him.
You're Mr. Wilkerson, the teacher?
I'm Ralph Wilkerson.
Mike Heck, Rick Heck's dad.
Hey, awesome to meet you. Please have a seat. I really want to establish a rapport with the parents of my students. You know, you can check in with me anytime on the school website, or better yet, follow my tweets.
Yeah, I don't know what that is, but thanks.
In the 2011 Oscar-winning film The King's Speech, when Lionel the speech therapist asks why we should bother to listen to what the king has to say, King George VI, who struggles with a debilitating stutter, declares, "I have a voice." He is not only speaking of overcoming a speech impediment, but becoming a fully functioning and respected leader. He knows that words matter. What we say and how we say it constitutes us as professionals, as humans in society. I'm a public speaking teacher. No pressure there at all. So I can relate to Lionel, but it's the plight of the king himself that inspired the title of this speech. One does not have to struggle with an actual speech impediment to have trouble finding one's voice. A dean only has to have his or her ideas shot down once in provost council to begin to struggle with the thoughts, could I have presented these ideas differently? Did the provost not listen to what I was really trying to say? Should I just shut up in the future? In this short time, I want to explore a premise that is easy to appreciate as true, but much harder to put into action every day when we need it most. Strategic and intentional communication is central to everything we do as deans. We tend to recognize when there's a communication problem, when communication breaks down, and when there just was a lack of communication. However, if your experience is like mine, most of the time when these observations or pronouncements are made, they're delivered as if they were a law of physics or a biological fact. Communication broke down, nothing we can do about it now. At the very heart of the matter, I define communication for you today as all the dynamic processes humans use in symbolic interaction with one another, including all cultural, interpersonal, group, rhetorical, technological, and mass-mediated dimensions. Finding one's voice goes far beyond giving confident, prepared remarks and sharing information. Here are many, but certainly not all of, the ways I see myself positioned in communication practice every day as dean. Interpersonal interactions and relationships with the provost, president, vice presidents, chairs, faculty members, and staff and students. Managing group dynamics on committees. Acknowledging vertical and horizontal power relationships in the organization. Managing emails. Knowing what to leave in, knowing what to leave out. Circumventing others' communication problems, such as the faculty member who's already put way too much into an email and is on the verge of sending it to the entire division, CC to the president. Active listening and strategic talking when conducting meetings large and small. Creating and maintaining a media and marketing presence for the college. Using rhetoric to persuade constituencies of the worthiness of liberal arts and sciences, for example. Developing alumni relationships. Making the best use of new information technologies and understanding the technological environment of our students. Promoting my faculty's achievements at strategic moments. Giving planned and unplanned remarks in public. And setting a tone and creating a culture for my college. In the outstanding academic satire film Wonder Boys, about an aging English professor struggling to produce his follow-up book and discovering a new sense of worth and vitality through a morose but talented student in his class, the professor's young female student is found asleep on top of his 2,000-page manuscript. She says to him, "Grady, you know how you always tell us that as writers we need to make choices? It seems like you didn't make any." I felt a bit like Grady when I began to write this address. I've studied human communication my entire career in its varied facets. How in the world was I going to choose what things about communication I wanted to impart to CCAS deans? So I made some choices about what I want to talk about. First, words matter. Our metaphors shape our realities. Second, Active listening and strategic talking are two sides of the same coin. And third, understanding the communication environment of our students may be more important now than in any other time in the past. I am going to present these ideas in 3 yoga poses. Not really. Scared you. I just think Patricia Zahn's book, My Life in 23 Yoga Poses, has a great title. I had to work that in somehow. But I decided not to discuss 23 communication themes, you'll be glad to hear. And I can only even do about 3 yoga poses well, so you'll just have to hear some themes. A good friend and fellow dean suggested that the name of this talk should be, "It's all about respectful, thoughtful, strategic communication, stupid." But I thought that wouldn't be appropriate to say in front of this audience, so I decided not to. That always takes a while to soak in. Seriously, I want you to consider that by being focused on communication at the center and implementing some intentional and strategic communication constructs, we as deans can be more effective, more persuasive, and more readily find our voice in our college, universities, and our states, and even nationally. Theme number 1, words matter. Our metaphors shape our realities. We all agree with employers that the primary transferable skills students need when they graduate are oral and written communication skills. Yet we tacitly or implicitly denigrate the worth of these skills. We relegate them to that soft and fluffy realm of social science. We make jokes that athletes and beauty queens get their degrees in communication, and it's an easy major that demands very little math. It's kind of true, the math part. Because we're in higher education, I think much of this perception of the communication field often spills over into how we see the importance of communication as administrators, unfortunately. I was speaking to our CIO a while back, and he was describing his dissertation research. He interviewed a large number of higher education administrators in several Midwest universities to find out what they most wanted from their IT services. He was surprised to find, but I was not, that they really cared very little about choosing hardware, software, or helping to plan the structure of IT. What they really wanted was better and more respectful communication between IT and them and their staff. The words we choose and the words we think in constitute our cultural realities. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, I like popular culture, can you tell? Professor Dumbledore says, "Words are, in my not-so-humble opinion, our most inexhaustible source of magic, capable of both inflicting injury and remedying it." Of course, this was a well-placed line by J.K. Rowling as an homage to the magic she has crafted with the Harry Potter book and film series. But it's true. Words can lift. Words can maim. Words can heal, and words can kill. As a concrete example, the clash over words and their meanings played out center stage in my deaning very, very recently. The backdrop. For 100 years, the Eastern Washington University mascot was the Savages. In the 1980s, yeah, you can just imagine, right? In the 1980s, the university changed it to the Eagles. Further, they eradicated any trace of the name Savages or the degrading cartoon of an American Indian that accompanied it from campus, including sanding the image off of hundreds of bricks in front of the stadium. At a very recent chairs and directors meeting, the chair of military science announced that they had named the battalion by the football field the Savage Eagle Battalion, in honor of those ROTC alums who still relate strongly to the mascot Savages. At the mentions of these words, the director of the American Indian Studies program and the Chicano Education program went into action. Didn't he know that this is disrespectful and derogatory term to Native Americans? Did he run this by anybody before making a sign and posting it by the football field and so on? The military science chair got defensive. He said his only intention was to wed tradition with the present for the ROTC alums. Savage describes the Eagles. It has nothing to do with Native Americans. The next day, I called up the military science chair and explained some basic communication theory to him. You can't control the meaning of certain words, no matter what your intentions. Many times the meaning of certain words are contested and need to be negotiated. At Eastern, the word savage or savages signifies disrespect for Native Americans no matter what one intends otherwise. Then, in order to get inside the chair's own metaphor, I said, you can't win this battle. This is a war of words and their meaning. It doesn't matter what you got, that you got the all clear from athletics and that no one else has yet complained about sign. We're committed to being a culturally sensitive university, and if 2 of our campus leaders find it culturally insensitive, we're going to act on that. You have to take down the sign. The military science chair was dissatisfied and a bit hurt that his good intentions, and they really were, could be taken so wrong. When I called the director of the American Indian Studies program, she was very pleased. And she was most pleased that she'd been heard and that action had been taken. She did share with me that the Native students were meeting that afternoon at her request, and they're going to discuss what actions they could take to protest the sign. No doubt the local papers would have been a clear choice, as well as a barrage of communications to the president's office. She said that would no longer be necessary. Communications scholar Brenda Durbin reminds us that verbing gets us further than nouning, which is not the same as the great t-shirt I saw in New Orleans that said, spooning often leads to forking. I don't know what that means. What she means is that when we assign states and traits to human interaction, we fail to appreciate the fluid and transactional nature of human communicating. You may think of your physics chair, for instance, as a rigid, closed-minded, argumentative ideologue. For you, those are his states and traits. An alternative is to think of him as a person who seems to be stopped from thinking more broadly about issues. He seems to be threatened by new ideas, but on the positive side, he's willing to vocalize his opinions in front of the group. When you start to see the physics chairs communicating in these verbing terms, it is much easier to think through strategies to make your communication with him better and more useful to the entire group. When you think of him as a bundle of undesirable traits, the nouns, you may be more likely just to write him off as an undesirable to work with, making him in turn even more rigid and your communication with him even more unproductive. Let's talk about metaphors some more. One way social theorists interpret and explain societies is to deconstruct the overarching metaphors that direct behavior. Researchers frequently engage in metaphorical thinking as they conceptualize, understand, and structure inquiry of new phenomena. The most commonly used metaphors compare societies to biological systems, machines, wars, legal codes, economic markets, games, and theater. Understanding what metaphors are at work in the overlapping organizations we work in is imperative to our flexibility and adaptation to changing situations. For example, often in development offices, the dominant metaphor is the game, or more specifically, sports. When setting up meetings with alums, my development director is always going to tee it up for me. Now that I play golf myself, I realize teeing it up is the easiest part. How about you drive it 300 yards into the fairway for me? Development officers are always trying to hit one out of the park or trying a line drive down the middle. These are all positive things. I applaud the optimism. However, the insider sports metaphor doesn't always resonate with faculty members, humanities donors, or women, for example. Our language in metaphor has the ability to include and exclude. And in the game of fundraising and friend-raising, can we really afford to exclude anybody? Further, since at least 2008, those of us at state institutions have been living out a metaphorical war with our governors and state legislators over scarce and shrinking resources. We have been besieged by freezes on hiring, raises, and travel. We have all had to hunker down and do more with less. Once the president, provost, or deans are testifying in front of the legislature, some of these war metaphors remain useful and appropriate. For example, the president might explain that our ability to deliver quality education will be decimated by a 20% budget cut. In times of war, we think of the need to make draconian cuts and sacrifices. Rhetorically, we let those in the university know that there may be very harsh decisions soon to come. Then we're positioned more rhetorically and behaviorally to make those extreme changes. Once we find ourselves talking to legislators in the hallway of the state capitol, however, one needs to speak softly and lose the big stick. The metaphor shifts. We need to be persuasive that we're all on one team, pulling for the good of all the people in the state. Everyone has his or her position to play, and if we all pull together, we'll get through these tough times even stronger. If not used very carefully, war metaphors can do the following things. First, the war metaphor moves us to an us versus them situation, evacuating possible middle ground and shades of gray. For example, to quote a famous politician, you're either with us or you're with the terrorists. Infamous? Oh, sorry. And in the opening video that we saw, in a clip from Dead Poets Society, Robin Williams declares this is a war for students' hearts and minds against armies of academics who wish to measure poetry. Second, the war metaphor can quickly become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we believe ourselves to be in a war, we prepare for it, and this makes the war more likely. Whenever we see others we work with as the enemy, we are mentally preparing for war. At my university, a senior faculty member has been at war with the chair for years. Although the chair has tried to operate in alternative metaphors and frameworks, sticking with the war metaphor allows the faculty member to see his harsh words and unbendable stubbornness as correct, and indeed the only course of action. Theme number 2. Active listening and strategic talking are two sides of the same coin. A general rule of thumb is that effective, benevolent leaders listen more than they speak. Let that soak in. To truly listen to another person takes mental discipline. It is akin to meditation, in that when you are truly listening to another, you are actively trying to keep out extraneous thoughts and noise to focus on what the other is saying and how they are saying it. If you are plotting your next clever comment the entire time the other person is talking, you are not engaged in active listening. Active listening is not a competitive sport. It is an act of empathy. Only if you have truly heard the other person can you effectively communicate with them. When you talk over another person's words, you are engaged in competitive, overlapping speech, not communication. As deans, we attend and run a heck of a lot of meetings, don't we ever? When leading a group in information sharing and discussion, such as chairs and directors meetings or CCAS board meetings, for example, I like to think of the experience as akin to conducting an orchestra or choreographing a dance. There are those metaphors again. To do it well takes all the best active listening and strategic talking skills you have. You have to be listening to the substance of the conversation and participating in a meta-language in your head. On one level, the biology chair just said there should be a policy to mandate classes meet during the final exam period, and the sociology chair said faculty have the right not to meet with students during the final exam period if they have them working on an alternative assignment. While synthesizing what they're saying, you need to keep track of the following. Who has talked too long? Who had input that makes most sense and you want to come back to it? Who has gone off on a tangent and needs to be reined in? Has enough time already been spent on this topic? Did everyone who wanted to speak get to? Did I manage to keep the exchange respectful? And so on. An active listening technique we have all learned somewhere along the way is to say back to the person or group we're interacting with, what I hear you saying is. Some of you think this technique cliché, but regardless of the phrasing you choose, I argue it's still one of the most effective communication tools that you have. People feel incredibly respected when you can restate to them what has been said to you. This technique also shows that you are doing your best to hear them, but like all human beings, you may have gotten it wrong. So here is an opportunity to correct any mishearing that can lead to misunderstanding. From that base, you are in a position to strategically talk. Even if you choose to disagree with what you've heard, you offer your next comments in the context of respect and understanding to the greatest extent possible. What I'm talking about is dialogue. Another term we think we all know, but most likely do not examine closely in our busy lives. It is the willingness to drop one's assumptions and view the world through the eyes of others. Everything we do as deans often feels so politicized. It is probably hard to imagine letting your guard down that much. However, this kind of communication creates a culture of dignified respect. This type of dialogue also requires imagination, procedural rigor, and sensitivity. It does not necessarily entail agreement or resolution. Differences, divergences, and oppositions are to be expected in human interaction. A good debate can be a delight. We learn how to do this kind of dialogic communication through our educational and teaching experiences. As deans, we should bring every tool we have collected along the way to bear on our work. But too often we check the interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary knowledge we have collected as professors at the door and do not bring them to bear on our work as administrators. I encourage you to bring all you know and have learned to running meetings and motivating groups. At each CCAS board meeting this year, I brought in something different for the board members to play with at their seats while we did our business. In January meeting, I brought rubber bendy things. That's what they're called. In the April meeting, I brought giant pipe cleaners. And in the July meeting, I brought molding clay and Play-Doh. And we decided at the table it smells like fun. It does smell like fun. I'm sure in January many thought it was frivolous and silly. Why did I think it was important to have objects to play with at the board meetings? Because I wanted to employ what I had learned in psychology, human development, children's studies, and organizational communication. Active hands make creative thoughts. An inactive body can lead to dull, distracted minds. When you have to sit in a chair for hours to accomplish a high-level cognitive task, you need something that will stimulate your creative brain center without taking you too far off the task at hand. We had very productive meetings this year, and we had no trouble staying within our allotted time frames. Another benefit was that we didn't feel all stiff and sore and tired at the end of sessions. Theme number 3, considering the current communication environment of our students. I'll take another slide. When we think about the latest information technology cycle we're in, dominated by social media, smartphones, and the Apple iUniverse, Steve Jobs, rest in peace, a good many communication scholars will say this is just the next cycle. However, if you're a parent of preteens or teens or a professor in the classroom, the move to social media world feels ever more like a paradigm shift. One way we consistently choose to understand the influence of new information technologies is to point to the current generation of students. Like the Beloit College Mindset List each year that reminds us that the incoming freshman class were born in 1993, they have never rolled down a car window, and the World Wide Web has been an online tool ever since they were born. I do not think it enough to try to understand the current social media and iUniverse through just a generational lens. Some things are the same, but many are fundamentally different. High schools don't know whether to block or embrace smartphones, iPads, Twitter, or Facebook accounts. In the same USA Today edition from the summer of 2011, 2 contrasting articles ran that epitomized the confusion. The first described how high schools in Florida and New York had once again decided to use blocking software to filter out sites that might be pornographic or violent. However, the teachers find, and this has been happening for years, the teachers find that it also blocks key educational opportunity sites for National Geographic, Flickr, and Skype, for example. The second article described how a New Jersey principal has fully embraced social media as a learning tool. He and his teachers use Facebook to communicate with students and parents, and in the classroom, teachers routinely ask the students to power up their cell phones to respond to class polls and quizzes. Rather than ban cell phones, the principal considers them mobile learning devices. I don't want to get too far into how the learning is different in the classroom now than in the past, but as deans, we cannot overlook the fact that reaching these students is different. We never did win the battle to get all of our students to sign on for official university email accounts, and now they don't use email. Missed that one. Our students consider email their parents' communication mode. Yes. Now commenting, rumoring, slandering, news perusing, and entertainment are all done through Facebook. For my daughters, Facebook, texting, and YouTube are the portals to everything they want and need in communications. They use Google and Wikipedia for schoolwork, but that is not their primary cyber environment. They have to go somewhere else to get that, to do that. Social media is where your communications have to be too. Web pages used to be the portals by which we could be assured that constituents could seek out our content. Now you need to be found and liked on Facebook and followed on Twitter. Notice the metaphors. They've shifted. The information superhighway metaphor was a product of the 1990s. It encouraged us to think of the internet as a way to get from point A to point B as fast as we could, stopping when and where we needed to. A solitary journey on our personal computer. Problems were framed accordingly. Bandwidth would allow more traffic on the road.
We had to make sure there was enough on-ramps for access, and so on. Ultimately, the metaphor invited us to think about the internet not in terms of communication, but in terms of economic growth. By contrast, the related metaphor of cyberspace and sites makes us think of the internet as an environment where communication actually takes place. This then leads us to ask questions about the quality of our interactions in cyberspace. How can the site or environment be designed in such a way that communication can be enhanced? So all we've been doing with the CCAS website all year. Although Facebook and Twitter were the brainchildren of hip programmers and investors, so were 1,000 other media products. It's their pattern of adoption that I find most fascinating. Why Facebook and Twitter are so widely used and adopted circles right back to the most basic social desires: to connect, to communicate, to be heard, to have a voice and to listen, to be part of something bigger than ourselves, to not be alone. In the environment of Facebook and Twitter, we are found, and we find, and we follow, and we're followed. We tweet, we IM, we befriend, we defriend. Much like the playground. Red Rover, send Billy right over. Social media such as Twitter offers us an alternative epistemology, while at the same time showing up an older communication theory of media effects. Influence is yielded by opinion leaders. Those with the most followers on Twitter have the potential to wield influence and quickly disseminate information, albeit unfiltered, unedited, and non-reviewed. In a May 6, 2011 article on the blog Social Flow, they showed pictorially what a rumor exchange on Twitter looks like. In this case, they were tracking the speculation about Osama bin Laden's death. The exchange had emerged as informed speculation on Twitter a full hour before any formal announcements were made. At Social Flow, they analyzed 14.8 million public tweets sent in the 1 hour between the announcement that there would be an emergency presidential press conference and the official White House announcement. When seen visually, the flow of tweets appear not like webs at all, but like constellations in the night sky. The opinion leaders with thousands of followers appear as supernovas with thousands of planets in their orbit, while connected users with less followers are like small stars orbited by a smaller group of planets. The spread of rumors and speculation on Twitter is exponential and viral. In my mind, this is what makes the environment an alternative epistemology from the information technologies that have come before it. And if we do not recognize that this is the communication reality of our students, we have a greater difficulty in knowing how to reach them or how to teach them. One extremely savvy iPad advertisement captures it perfectly. It says, "We'll never stop sharing our memories or getting lost in a good book. We'll always cook dinner and cheer for our favorite team. We'll still go to meetings, make home movies, and learn new things. But how we do all this will never be the same." The takeaway is the medium is not the whole message. Human beings will always seek out ways to connect to others and want to hold on to the past. However, if you don't keep up with technology changes, you may be left behind and left alone. What we have to teach our students may be much the same as before, but the ways we reach them and effectively connect with them may very well never be the same. Our challenge as deans is to find frameworks for situating this linked social media ecology that fit with our mission as universities and arts and sciences in particular. While this might require a fundamental rethinking of pedagogy and marketing, it does not mean that education must all migrate entirely online, or even that we need to go chasing after every new technology that comes along. Instead, administrators and faculty need to focus on how to leverage the social media environment that our students so readily embrace in order to produce new educational environments that are open, collaborative, linked, distributed, engaging, and get students connected to educators, information, knowledge, learning, and each other. In conclusion, don't clap there. In conclusion, I would be remiss if I didn't thank some people who have made this a very special year and fulfilling one for me. I so admire the CCAS board. They work so hard, and they're such great people, and I count you all as my valued colleagues and friends. I want to thank Anne-Marie McCartan for all she does for CCAS with such great finesse and intelligence and care. Let's just give a little applause for that. A huge thank you goes out to John Demke from Media and Marketing at Eastern Washington University for creating and producing the opening video with me. I'm grateful to my husband Peter up front for all his support and insight on how one really talks about communication. And finally, I have colleagues in CCAS who I count among my very special friends, and you know who you are. I would also be remiss if I didn't leave you with at least one public speaking tip to improve the dean's speech. How about the napkin speech? When surprised at an event by an invitation to speak, an event where you'd hope to just have a glass of wine and some reception food and get out early, do the following. Go ahead and grab that food because you're going to need the napkin. In fact, grab an extra napkin. While trying to seem as if you're actively listening to the other fascinating people at your table, jot down the following key terms on the napkin. Something to introduce your remarks, 3 key terms, and a conclusion. There are exceptions to every rule. This is one of those moments where I give you full permission not to really be actively listening to the others at the table, because you in fact need to be preparing to save your own butt from totally bombing in front of an audience impromptu. To repeat, don't listen actively, save own butt. And there is one more secret to professional public speaking that I want to share with you. When preparing to speak, it's very important to visualize, do some visualization. Visualize the room, the audience, the podium. Most importantly, visualize yourself doing well and the warm, fulfilled feeling you'll have when you leave the stage. I visualized I would ride out here in a Palomino horse over a path of rose petals to a thunderous applause and a standing ovation. So thanks a lot. In parting, remember that the faculty's role is to think for the college, the president's role is to speak for the college, the dean's role is to keep the faculty from speaking and the president from thinking. Seriously, go forth, find your voice. You've been a great audience. I'll be here all weekend.